I never saw the moment it began to unravel. In the early years, fidelity wasn't something I questioned. It lived inside me like breathing, automatic, unconscious. David and I had built our life the way one builds a house, brick by brick, memory by memory, each day sealing itself into the next. Morning coffee brewed in the quiet of the kitchen, the clink of plates from lazy Sunday breakfasts, the way he would find my hand beneath the covers on cold nights, all the small things that stitched a marriage together without our even noticing. It was a good life. A life many would have envied. And I was happy. Or at least, I believed I was. There were days when the routine comforted me like a familiar song. Other days, it hummed with a strange emptiness, a silence in the spaces between his words, between our glances. I dismissed it as the natural quiet of years spent together. Surely every marriage softens into something less fiery, more steady. That's what love was meant to do, wasn't it? Then came the night of the charity gala, the one I had almost skipped because the thought of another evening of polite conversation and sparkling wine made me feel unspeakably tired. David had encouraged me to go, pressing a warm kiss to my temple as he left for his late meeting, promising he would join me later if he could. The hall glittered under 1,000 tiny lights. I remember feeling untethered, adrift among laughter and clinking glasses. And that was when I saw him, Marcus, standing alone near a large painting, a glass of dark wine tilting in his hand. His face wasn't the kind you notice immediately, but his presence was impossible to ignore, calm, grounded, as if he belonged to some slower, richer world than the one spinning around us. Our first conversation was harmless, forgettable even. A comment about the painting, a laugh shared at the absurdity of the appetizers. When David arrived, later than he'd promised, I was already deep in conversation with others. He kissed my cheek, distracted, murmured apologies about work. We went home together, as always. Nothing had changed, and yet, as I undressed in the soft dark of our bedroom, I found myself thinking not about David's absence, but about the way Marcus's eyes had lingered just a second longer than politeness allowed. It was nothing. I told myself that. I told myself that for a long time. I saw Marcus again 2 weeks later, almost by accident, though, if I am honest with myself, perhaps I had been hoping to. It was at a cafe downtown, the kind of place tucked between bookstores and vintage shops, where time seemed to slow and the smell of roasted coffee beans clung to the walls. I had gone there alone, seeking a quiet hour away from everything, away from the to-do lists, the steady rhythm of my carefully ordered life. He was there, sitting by the window, a novel open in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other. Our eyes met, and recognition passed between us like the faintest breeze, stirring something dormant inside me. He smiled first. I hesitated, just a heartbeat before walking over. "May I join you?" I asked, surprising myself. "Please," he said, setting his book aside. Our conversation picked up as though no time had passed since the gala. It was easy, effortless, a kind of ease that felt unfamiliar and thrilling. We talked about everything and nothing, favorite authors, the absurdity of modern art, the way the city always smelled like rain even when the sun was shining. He made me laugh, not the polite laughter I gave so often at dinner parties and work functions, but a real, startled kind of laugh that warmed my cheeks. When I glanced at my watch, an hour had slipped away unnoticed. I left with a strange lightness in my chest and a sense of disquiet I couldn't name. The afternoon shadows stretched long across the sidewalk as I walked home, but all I could feel was the lingering weight of Marcus's gaze, the faint echo of our laughter in my ears. At home, David greeted me with a kiss and asked about my day. I told him about errands, about the weather, every detail except the hour spent across a small cafe table from another man. It wasn't important, I reasoned. It was harmless. And yet, that night, lying beside David with the weight of his hand resting against my hip, I stared into the darkness and thought of Marcus. I told myself it was nothing but a passing fancy, a flicker of something meaningless. Still, somewhere deep inside, A crack had formed in the door I had kept so carefully closed. And once a door cracks, it never truly shuts again. The next time we met, it wasn't by accident. Marcus invited me to an exhibition opening, a small, private showing tucked away in a converted warehouse, far from the polished galleries David and I occasionally attended together. I hesitated for days, the invitation sitting in my inbox like a secret too heavy to hold. I didn't mention it to David. I told myself it was because he wouldn't be interested, because he would be tired from work. But deep down, I knew the truth. When the night came, I dressed carefully, not extravagantly, but with an attention I hadn't given myself in years. A soft navy dress, delicate earrings, perfume brushed lightly at the base of my throat. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving and wondered, briefly, who I was dressing for. The exhibition buzzed with soft conversation and muted music. I found Marcus easily, standing by a sculpture that twisted upward like reaching hands. He smiled when he saw me, and something loosened inside my chest. We wandered through the gallery together, talking in hushed voices. Our arms brushed once, then again, and neither of us moved away. The pieces around us blurred into shapes and shadows. The only thing I could truly see was the light in Marcus's eyes, the way his voice softened when he spoke my name. Afterward, we found ourselves walking along quiet streets, the city humming faintly around us. It was late, and the air smelled of distant rain. I should have gone home. I should have pulled away when he reached for my hand, when his fingers curled around mine with a familiarity that both comforted and terrified me. But I didn't. We wandered until we found a narrow park, deserted in the night, where a single bench waited under a canopy of stars. We sat close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body seeping into mine. We spoke of dreams we had buried, regrets we never voiced aloud. His words folded over me like a blanket against the gathering chill. When he leaned closer, I could have stopped him. When he touched my cheek, I could have turned away. But I didn't. The moment unfolded not with wild passion, but with the inevitable, aching slowness of a tide pulling away from the shore. It was tender, fragile, a connection formed less from desire than from a loneliness so deep it felt endless. Later, as I sat in my car, hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel, guilt began to uncoil inside me like smoke. I drove home through streets that looked unfamiliar in the heavy dark, each turn leading me further into a life I no longer fully recognized. David was asleep when I entered. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, the peace on his face. I thought of waking him, of confessing everything in a rush of broken words. But I said nothing. I slipped into bed beside him, careful not to disturb his sleep. The betrayal had already happened. It lived now in the spaces between my heartbeat and my breath, an invisible weight I carried alone. The days that followed were carved from silence. I moved through them as if underwater, every sound muffled, every moment weighted. David would kiss my forehead before leaving for work, and I would stand at the window long after he had gone, watching the world spin onward, untouched by the storm inside me. I saw Marcus again once, twice, careful meetings tucked into the folds of my days. Each time was a tether pulling me further from the life I had known, each shared glance a thread weaving a different future. There was a tenderness in him that both comforted and frightened me, as if he saw all the parts of me I had carefully hidden away, the dreams I had abandoned, the sharp edges I had softened. Yet at home, David remained a steady presence, unknowing, unchanged. His patience was a balm, his laughter a familiar song. He did not press when I grew quiet, did not question when my smiles faltered. He loved me with a kind of steadfastness that once made me feel safe, and now only made me feel hollow. I found myself trapped between two lives. One built on the sturdy stones of history, of promises made and kept. The other rising like mist before me, uncertain, intoxicating, full of could-bes. In the quiet hours of the night, when David's hand found mine under the covers, I would lie awake, my heart a restless bird in my chest. I would remember Marcus's voice, the way it wrapped around me like a thread, pulling me closer to something unnamed. But when I pictured walking away, pictured the empty spaces in the home David and I had built, a cold fear gripped me. Was it truly love that drew me to Marcus, or simply the yearning for something new, something unspoiled by time? And if I left, would that yearning only follow me, hollowing out whatever life I tried to build next? I stood on the threshold of two roads, my heart stretched between them, beating a ragged rhythm that matched neither path. In one hand, I held the warmth of the past. In the other, the fragile promise of a different future. I did not know which way to turn. Perhaps I never would. The weight of two hearts was heavier than I had ever imagined.